Cat Days by Griffin Rose on AO3. Episode 33, Chapter 6, Flashback Thursday, Milestones. His appointment with the analyst wasn't for a few weeks, and by the time Izuku actually got to go, he had so many questions he hoped they could answer. Disease, mass, and his coloration, what his body did with the excess material, like all the calcium in his bones if he turned into an octopus or something. The analyst was a nice enough woman, humoring all his questions. He was just as curious about all the tests she performed as he was about his quirk. She had to do the test multiple times when he switched into different forms, and then she had him swallow a special pill and did a lot of tests again, this time tracking the pill in a system. He was there all day, and he wasn't even getting answers yet. She had taken blood samples and was going to examine all of them before telling him anything concrete, which would probably take a week. The wait was torture. "I'm proud of you," Shouta said, sitting next to him on the train ride home. "You did well with all the poking and prodding today." "It was fun," Izuku smiled. "I wish you could tell us right away about that stuff." The only definite thing they had gotten was she tracked the pill in the system through his transformations. It stayed in his stomach, which meant if he was sick and transformed, whatever medicine he would have had still affected him. Whether that effect was good or bad, we'll have to wait for the blood test results. They had katsudan for dinner that night, and Hisashi had even gotten ice cream for dessert. Izuku was a little confused that Shouta and Hisashi had been so worried about this, and they seemed confused as why he wasn't, but they were happy enough to build another fort in the living room and watch a movie. If Izuku morphed into a cat to watch from Shota's lap, it was just because the fort was small. If Hisashi had deliberately made the fort a little smaller, it had been unintentional. He was saving his blankets for bedtime, okay? Shouta brought Izuku back to the analyst a week later to go over the results. Izuku vibrated with excitement the whole way there, and his notebook was ready to go. Dr. Fukuda, the analyst, matched Izuku's enthusiasm as she explained the results, handing over a big file for them to take home. "You've got a fascinating quirk, Izuku," she said. "It completely rearranges the structure of your DNA when you morph, reforming as whatever animal you morphed into. This means you could easily access the instincts of that animal, and the way you do with your human instincts." They had more or less figured that out with his training, but she confirmed his brave wings shifted with each transformation, which explained his struggle to morph back again when he transformed. Izuku wrote everything down ferociously. The doctor also confirmed their suspicions about giving him medicine. "You have to be careful when he's sick. His animal forms have more tolerance for human medicine than a regular animal, but I wouldn't recommend giving him more than half a dose of anything if he's prone to shifting with a fever." Shouta frowned. "Which he is." She nodded. "Your best bet is to catch it early and keep his fever from getting too high. But if you miss it, just make sure it's a small dose and try to keep him from shifting." Still frowning, Shouta nodded again. "They'll have to be careful going forward, on the lookout for the slightest sign of an oncoming cold. He'd have to warn Izuku if any of his classmates were sick too, so he'd know to be extra vigilant." The analyst went over a few more things, answering some of Izuku's questions, and prompting entirely new ones. Shouta was exhausted by the time that they were able to get back home, but Izuku was buzzing with energy. He let the kid tell Hisashi everything they had learned and closed his eyes on the couch. Did all parents have to go through this with their kids? Did everyone make special accommodations for their quirks, or worry about specific problems no one else was afflicted by? Or was Shouta just lucky? He was going to be paranoid every time Izuku so much as sneezed now, and the poor kid was going to have to suffer through most of this colds without proper medication. This was going to be awful for everyone involved. Shouta was so lost in his thoughts, he hadn't noticed Izuku and Hisashi had stopped talking, not until a small weight with too many knees and elbows climbed on top of him. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked. He brought one arm around Izuku's back, so he wouldn't fall. "Yeah, just thinking." "Do you want your quirk analyzed too?" Izuku asked. Shouta looked at him in surprise. "What?" "I was wondering if Dr. Fukuyoda could tell you anything about yours that you didn't already know." Izuku went on. Like, why it makes your hair float, and how you can make your scarf fly like that. Unless one of your parents had a levitation or telekinesis quirk, and that's just the recessive part. Should have blinked and huffed out a laugh. My grandmother can levitate a little, he admitted. Most of his quirk was unique to himself, completely separate from his parents. His father had a paralyzing quirk, and his mother had a weak hypnosis quirk. Somehow they combined to make erasure. It made more sense than Izuku's, at least. His shapeshifting had nothing to do with telekinesis or fire breathing. It wasn't unheard of for a kid's abilities to be unique to the family, but it was rare enough to always be a surprise when it happened. Shouta had never cared before, but now he sort of did. He wished one of Izuku's parents had shared his abilities. If only so they could have figured out this stuff first and passed down their tips and tricks. Yeah, that would have been nice. But at least he sat there now, watching Izuku ramble off theories about Shota's quirk, and then Hisashi, before finally going back to his own. He realized he didn't mind exploring this with Izuku. The kid's eyes lit up when he talked about quirks, and it was a joy to watch him learn and discover his own abilities. They'd be careful when the kid got sick. That was all. It wasn't the end of the world. As it turned out, he was the next one to get sick. A flu was going around UA, and the second he felt a sore throat, he asked Tensei to watch Izuku for a few days. He couldn't send the kid to Nemuri's, even though she was closer, because she was just as likely to get sick right now. Tensei didn't believe him at first. You want me to watch Izuku for a week? I can't risk him getting sick, Shouta said. His friends all knew about the complications they had regarding medicine. He didn't understand why Tensei was being so difficult. I know, it's just seems like you're overreacting a little, Tensei said. He's not going to like being away from you for so long. He was trying not to think about that part. It's only a week, and he hasn't seen Tenya in a while. Tensei sighed. What about school? He can't miss a week of school like that, and I can't take him with my patrol schedule right now. Shouta grimaced. He briefly considered letting Izuku take himself to school and from school before shutting that down. Call him paranoid, but he rescued too many kids kidnapped on their way from school. It's not ideal, but I'd honestly rather have him miss class. He's smart enough, it won't hurt him too much. Please, Tensei. Jeez. An actual please and my name? How can I say no? He couldn't, and Hisashi dropped Izuku off that night. Shouta had already started taking medication to fight off the flu. He was not willing to take any chances, so, in the end, he only had a mild case. It was still unpleasant, and after he threw up the fourth time, he was grateful Izuku wasn't around, just so he didn't have to spare the energy to take care of him too right now. The video called every night. After Shouta forced himself to shower and look somewhat presentable, he still saw the worry in Izuku's eyes, and he did his best to calm it. He didn't think it worked. Once Recovery Girl gave him the all clear, he and Hisashi cleaned the apartment before Izuku came home. Hisashi got sick the next night. Shouta kicked him out to Nemuri's place. Sometimes, Izuku's life felt like a dream. Living with Shouta and Hisashi was so different than his life before with his mom and dad. It felt like two different lives altogether. Listing the differences would take too long, and it was easier for him to sum it up with everything. Mostly he tried not to think about his old life. He liked his new life, and he was happy and content to play with Tenya or talk about heroes with Shouta. His new classmates weren't mean to him, and school was a lot more fun than it used to be. There wasn't really much to miss from his old life. Except, there was one thing Shouta and Hisashi could never give him, no matter how hard they tried. Izuku would never get his mother back. That was one of the things he missed from before. He helped his mom cook in the kitchen, or snuggled up with her when watching TV. He'd tell her all about a new hero he saw on the news, and she'd respond in those over-exaggerated, interesting noises. She used to buy him fancy-colored pens for him to write in his notebooks, and she surprised him all the time with new All Might action figures. He lost all those notebooks and action figures in the fire, of course. and that made him sad, if he thought about it too much. But thinking about his mother made him even more sad. The kind of sad that would strip any smile from his face and make him curl up in Shota's lap again as a cat. Shouta didn't really question it, most of the time, and he seemed happy enough to give up his mobility to let Izuku have this. Izuku was good at not thinking about it, usually. And when he did, he was good at hiding it, until he was a cat. And then Hisashi and Shouta just thought he was sleepy or in a cuddly mood. At least, he thought he was good at hiding it. Shouta liked to think he was pretty clever most of the time. That confidence was a little shaken after not realizing his cat was a human child for 3 months, but usually he was quick to catch on to things, like Izuku's growing depression. Well, depression might be too strong of a word yet, but he didn't know what else to call it. The days where Izuku was quiet and distant, before he morphed into a cat and avoided questions altogether. Izuku always bounced back within a day, and Shouta was trying to give him space. Izuku had lived through a lot of major changes in the past year, after all, and had his entire world flipped upside down. As cheerful and as sunny as Izuku usually was, it wasn't a stretch to believe he needed sad days to balance it all. The closer they got to November, nearing the anniversary of the day they met, the more often it happened. It didn't take a genius to do the math. This wasn't only the anniversary of when they met, after all. Soon it would be a year since Izuku's apartment burned, and his mother died. Shouta couldn't blame Izuku at all for his sad days. He just wished he knew how to make it better. A few days before his birthday, he came back from patrol and checked on Izuku, like he always did. Izuku was curled up as a cat. He perked up when he noticed Shouta. "Everything okay?" Shouta asked. With a whine, Izuku jumped down from his bed and bounced over Shouta. Shouta scooped him up in a familiar motion. "What's wrong?" Izuku chose to bury his face in Shota's scarf, rather than answer. It was going to be one of those nights, then. Shouta went to his own room and put Izuku on his pillow before grabbing something more comfortable to sleep in. This wasn't the first time Izuku had a bad dream and sought Shouta out the second he come home. But it was the first time he'd done it while morphed. Shouta changed in the bathroom and brushed his teeth. Returning as quickly as possible, Izuku snuggled up next to him as soon as he was under the covers. "You want to talk about it?" Shouta offered. Izuku pressed harder against him, so Shouta assumed that was a no. "Okay. Try and get some sleep. I'm right here." He had no idea if Izuku slept or not. Shouta slept as much as he usually did until he heard Hisashi get up, and then he watched Izuku for a few minutes. He wasn't sure if he should be concerned that Izuku hadn't morphed back yet, or not. If his kid had actually been sleeping, then it would make sense. But he knew Izuku had been restless most of the night, and something was clearly bothering him. A stressed Izuku, paired with Quirk activation, was never good. His alarm went off a few minutes later, startling Izuku. He was quick to smooth him. "You're okay. You're in my room." Izuku dropped his head against him. Shouta stroked his back. "Must have been some nightmare." Izuku curled up a little more, flicking his tail over his eyes. Was he agreeing with Shota's statement, or was this something else? Izuku not being able to talk when he transformed was surprisingly inconvenient. "Can you tell me what's going on?" Shouta asked. "I'm worried. I can help you better if I knew what was wrong." Izuku meowed. Shouta sat up, scooting back against the headboard and lifting Izuku into his lap. "Can you please change back so we can talk?" He waited a minute in silence before Izuku morphed back. The kid's limbs were in a very uncomfortable position, and he promised himself the next time he'd keep Izuku off his lap until he morphed. "Sorry," Izuku mumbled. Breaking through the pain, Shouta patted Izuku's head. A few moments later, he cleared his throat. "Forget about it. Accident." "Ah, yes. Grieving. I wondered if we were going to touch upon it or if we just weren't because of the time skip, but we are touching upon it. Grieving is a very tricky thing to deal with. Some people grieve in different ways than other people's, and that's okay. Grieving is different. Everybody grieves at their own pace with their own ways of grieving. And that's okay. Sometimes you don't always grieve the same as everybody else. Somebody might get over it in months. Somebody might not get over it. Somebody might take forever. Some might not take that long. It literally depends on who you are and how you handle such a big traumatic event. Because losing someone is traumatic. You know, losing someone is hard to accept, and it's such a foreign concept, and it's such a big concept that we don't even know what happens to the person after. Do they completely disappear and you will never see them again, period? Do you believe in, you know, religions where there is an afterlife? Do you believe in an afterlife? Do you believe in rebirth? What do you believe, right? And a lot of the times, our religious beliefs have to do a lot on how we grieve and how we cope with grieving, and can actually help when coping with grieving. You know, some people turn to tarot card readings or those paranormal people who could quote-unquote communicate with the ghost, which I do not trust those people. Not because I think they're a hoax or anything. It could be legitimate. They're actually talking to ghosts. Not judging. Because I do believe in stuff like that. I'm saying not to trust them, because never trust any spirit claiming to be a loved one or relative, because that is a recipe to get manipulated. They're gonna turn your grief against you. And a lot of the times, it is, you know, I can't say the demon word, because, I'm in my house, and, let me knock on wood. Because I don't want to do that. And then also, not to mention, malicious spirits, all that stuff. They will take advantage of your grief. Trust me, they will. They have, and nothing's stopping them. And, you know, the worst part is sometimes you don't even understand if it is that person, or if it is something pretending to be that person with malicious intent. And again, it could also just be that the human that is claiming to say that they're talking to your dead relative could be the one with malicious intent, and they're not actually talking to anything, and they're a hoax, and they're just stealing your money. So, again, never trust that. It could be fake, and honestly, the better alternative is that it is fake, and not that it's real and you're getting manipulated by this ancient being who can manipulate you and can really harm you. So, sometimes it's best to get scammed. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.